can never be the same again.
Pet dead. In the quiet town of Dunsworth, nestled between the whispering woods and an endless stretch of farmlands, people always said life moved slow. The only real excitement was the annual harvest fair or the occasional barn fire. But things changed after the first outbreak. Not the kind of outbreak that burned across continents or sent governments crumbling. No, this one was strange, localized, small, and, according to the authorities, manageable. The dead rose, but only here, in Dunsworth and its surrounding counties. Scientists came, soldiers patrolled, and reporters swarmed the place for a while. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, the world's attention shifted elsewhere. And the people of Dunsworth were left with a problem: the dead no longer stayed dead. At first, there was fear. Graves were dug deeper, coffins nailed tighter, and families sat up through the night with shotguns across their knees, waiting for the scratching at the windows. But then, something curious happened. Some of the risen weren't violent. Not at first. An old farmer named Harris Bickle was the first to notice. His wife had passed from pneumonia, and a week later she wandered back up to their porch, pale-eyed and slow, dragging her slippers across the dirt. Harris didn't scream. He didn't shoot her. He just opened the door and let her inside. And when neighbors came by, they found Mrs. Bickle sitting at her old chair, staring blankly at the television while Harris wept quietly beside her. The news spread like wildfire. Soon after, more families started keeping their returned loved ones. The authorities tried to stop it, of course. Posters went up: report all reanimated. Do not approach. They are not your loved ones. But the people of Dunsworth had lost too much already. In their eyes, the government didn't understand. The dead weren't strangers. They were theirs. That's how the era of pet zombies began. Part 1. The normalization. Shops began selling reinforced collars and chains. Hardware stores made a fortune on padlocks, cages, and modified doors. A man named Donald Cragg opened Eternal Companions, a business that specialized in grooming and maintaining reanimated loved ones, filing down the teeth, clipping away rot, even spraying perfume over their sour smell. Children could be seen walking skeletal dogs with clouded eyes. Old women rocked in chairs while the decayed husbands shuffled in circles nearby. It became ordinary, in a grotesque way. There was even a set of unspoken rules. Never feed them meat. Never let them wander unattended. Never remove the restraints. Most followed these rules. Most. Part 2. The Skeptic. Eleanor Pike, the town's new schoolteacher, found the whole thing abhorrent. She had moved from the city, lured by the promise of quiet streets and cheap rent. When she first saw a child leading what looked like a gray-skinned toddler on a leash across the playground, she nearly fainted. Parents waved off her concerns. "You'll get used to it, Miss Pike. It's just our way now." But she didn't get used to it. Not when she heard the faint snarling from basements during her evening walks, or when she saw milky eyes following her as she passed windows. She noticed how the townsfolk spoke lovingly of the pets, even though their pets smelled of damp earth and death. One evening, after grading papers, Eleanor heard scratching outside her rented cottage. She peeked through the curtains and saw a teenage boy struggling with his leash. At the other end was what once had been his sister, no older than 12. Her head twitching unnaturally as her jaw clicked open and shut. The boy whispered harshly, "Stop it, Mary. Sit still." But Mary wasn't listening. She was staring directly at Eleanor's window. Part 3. The First Incident. The first real incident came during the harvest fair. Every family brought their pets, proudly parading them like show ponies. Some dressed them in Sunday clothes, others tied ribbons in their thinning hair. Music played, children laughed, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. Then Mrs. Cragg's zombie, once her husband, snapped his chain. The crowd scattered as the creature lunged at the nearest stall, tearing into sacks of grain, though his jaws snapped wildly at anything that moved. People screamed, and in the chaos, a child was dragged down. Blood sprayed the straw-covered ground. When the militia shot the zombie in the head, the entire fairground went silent. Mrs. Crag collapsed over the body, shrieking curses at the soldiers. The child survived, though scarred. But whispers spread. Maybe the posters were right. Maybe they weren't their loved ones after all. Part 4. The Collector. Still, not everyone was afraid. Some became obsessed. One such man was Ezra Colton, a recluse who lived at the edge of the woods. He collected zombies the way others might collect stamps or coins. People said he had over 20 in his barn, chained to the walls, each one labeled with a little wooden plaque. Ezra would invite curious townsfolk to visit, showing off his collection like rare artifacts. This one, he'd say, tapping a bald man's cracked skull, was the town's old mare. And this lovely specimen was a librarian. Listen, she still tries to mouth the words of books. The zombies groaned and strained at their chains, the air reeking of rot. Children dared each other to go inside, but none lasted long. Eleanor once glimpsed the barn when she cycled past. It was alive with muffled groans, like a hive of hornets. She pedaled faster, heart hammering. Part 5. The rot spreads. Months passed, and more accidents occurred. A grandfather tore out his granddaughter's throat when his chain slipped. A dog zombie gnawed its way through the neighbor's livestock. The authorities threatened to intervene again, but Dunsworth resisted. Petitions were signed, protests erupted, and the militia quietly withdrew. Eleanor kept her distance until one night, walking home, she heard crying behind a hedge. She found a girl clutching a leash, at the end of which dragged her mother's corpse. "She doesn't remember me anymore," the girl sobbed. "She doesn't even look at me." The zombie lifted its head, dead eyes catching the moonlight, and for the briefest moment, Eleanor swore it smiled. Part 6. The Fall. The end began when Ezra's collection escaped. No one knew how. Some said a chain snapped, others whispered Ezra set them loose himself. But one night, the barn doors swung open, and 20 corpses staggered into the town, driven not by memory or loyalty, but by hunger. By dawn, Dunsworth was unrecognizable. Streets ran slick with blood. Houses stood open, curtains flapping, as groans echoed through the alleys. Those who survived barricaded themselves inside the schoolhouse, Eleanor among them. She huddled with terrified children and a handful of parents, listening to the moans outside. Through the broken windows, she saw familiar faces, neighbors, shopkeepers, classmates, all reduced to snarling things. Chains dangled from their wrists and ankles like forgotten ornaments. It was then Eleanor realized the truth. They had never been pets. They had never been family. They had only been waiting. Epilogue. Weeks later, when a government cleanup team finally swept through, they found Dunsworth emptied. Houses were wrecked, barns abandoned, fields churned into mud. Of Eleanor, the children, or anyone else, there was no trace. But in the woods, chains clinked faintly in the wind. And if you listened closely, you could hear them still, the pets of Dunsworth, roaming free, waiting patiently for new masters. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, remember to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good scare.